Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Vortex Razor HD Gen 3 1:10 optic. It's been a while since I've seen such a buzz generated around an optic that was coming out to market. Vortex, when they announced the 1:10, definitely generated a lot of interest and a lot of speculation and a lot of desire to see what you were going to get out of the optic. At first it started out as a rumor, which manifested into the reality of a 34mm main tube 1:10 first focal plane optic with either two reticle options, either MOA or MRAD. The one that Vortex sent me for review is actually the MRAD reticle, the EBR, that has the same footprint, roughly the same length, and the same weight as their very, very venerable, very popular, very durable 1:6 Razor 2. So what you were getting is 4 more magnification with a very similar footprint, same length, roughly same length, and same weight, which seems like it should be impossible. But as it turns out, it's not. Very, very long time ago, I wasn't a big fan of variable magnification optics on rifles, mainly because you didn't have a true 1x. You saw a lot of optics that were, from even very well-known, very high-quality companies offering like a 1.2 or 1.4 and calling it a 1x. True 1x is always something I was looking for. I was also looking for first focal plane. I like first focal plane in optics that go down to 1x as long as there's an illuminator reticle. Without that illuminator reticle, even if it's an etched glass reticle like the 1:10 is, it's kind of complicated to take even a simple or a very, very specific graduated reticle system like the EBR. Without that illuminated reticle, depending on the lighting conditions and what you're shooting at, if you're on 1x, it can be very hard to see your actual point of aim. So illuminated reticle is definitely a must. Illuminated reticles in magnified optics are relatively new, considering how long magnified optics have been around, and their quality has improved. One thing you don't usually see from magnified optics with illuminated reticles is a really, really long battery life, and that's because most manufacturers don't like adding notch filters or very, very dense notch filters to magnified glass, because the whole purpose of magnifying glass is clarity in all lighting conditions, and notch filters can take away from that. So your battery life is going to be affected by that, because the dot is going to have to be brighter in order to be projected onto a non-notch filtered glass in order for you to see it in the lighting conditions you're using it in, depending on what brightness setting you're on, which is really going to significantly affect your battery life. That being said, illuminated reticles for me, more of a purpose at 1x, maybe 2x, if I'm going to do that setting. But if I'm dialing out the 10 to shoot at distance, illuminated reticle is probably not something I'm going to use. I'm going to be using that traditional etched reticle. As I already said, we're looking at a 1:10, which has the same footprint as Vortex's 1:6, the venerable Razor 2, with a 34mm main tube, 24mm objective lens diameter. Now, generally, when you get into these higher magnifications, you start to lose eye relief. One of our biggest concerns with the low power variable magnification optics is, what's the eye relief going to be like? Is the eye relief going to cause me to significantly have to change my cheek weld or my chin weld, depending on what height riser you're using, as I dial out to greater magnification? What I found with the 1:10 throughout the review process is the eye relief is slightly less. And when I say slightly, I mean we're talking fractions of an inch, literally, than the eye relief that I like on the 1:6 that I get from the 1:6. And one of my favorite things about the 1:6 was it has a very generous eye box, if you will. And I don't feel like I lost that going to the 1:10, which is amazing, because of the companies out there that have attempted 1:10s in the past, and Vortex wasn't the first company to do it, but I feel like as far as eye relief is concerned, they didn't have to do it first because they did it best. The eye relief on the 1:10 is very forgiving regardless of what height riser you're going to use. as long as you're, you know, acclimated to your cheek weld. Shooting from a 1x position and then dialing out rapidly to 10, if I did have to make an eye relief correction, it was very, very minimal, which I like a lot. Something you can do to stage yourself as well, if eye relief, if you're going to be rapidly transitioning, because the eye relief on 1x is going to be marginally more forgiving than the eye relief is going to be on 10x. So dial out the 10, set your cheek weld, and then go back to 1. So if you have to dial back out, your eye relief is going to be good to go. With the MRAD adjustments, precision was not a problem. It does have captured turrets, caps. With this optic, I totally get that. If it was more of a long, extreme long range precision optic, like a 1 to 15 or, you know, 1 to 20, if that's even going to be possible in the future, maximum magnification being 15, 20, 25 for extreme long ranges, then having lockable but exposed turrets for dialing in would be more useful. But for this optic, I think it makes perfect sense to have those captured turrets protected, so we don't have to run into any issues of inadvertent, you know, drops. For my review process, I mounted the 1 to 10 on my ADM UIC machine gun. I wanted to be able to get some select fire on it. Very first thing I'm going to do for virtually anything I review is my 500 round burn down. During my 2,000 round review process, start things off right, 500 round accelerated rate of fire. With an optic, generally what I'm looking for when I do a burn down is if that excess heat creates any problems, if there's any kind of transfer to the optic, which affects the reticle. In this case, I'm going to put, with the Vortex 1 to 10, I turned my illuminated reticle on, left it on a 1x setting, and I wanted to see if there was any adverse heats from that heat generation affecting either reticle, flickering, brightness, kill it, or any kind of heat transfer to the optic body itself. Now, that being said, the optic is sitting quite far away, relatively speaking, from where most of that heat's being generated. So I didn't really think it was going to be necessarily an issue, but recoil is also a concern as well. So I'm going to do 500 rounds accelerated as quickly as possible. So here's your burn down. First to last round of those 500 rounds, no issues whatsoever. The Vortex 1 to 10 held up great. Our reticle maintained crisp, concise brightness. I didn't have any issues whatsoever. Speaking specifically about the reticle, and that's just jumping right into it, throughout the rest of the review process, I spent most of my time, not all of my time, but most of my time shooting at a little bit further distances. I did a lot of up-close work because I wanted to see how the true 1X, which I'll talk about next. But I think where this optic really shines is the fact that it is a optic that can be used for CQB or close quarters purposes on that 1 power setting. But it still does very, very well at those intermediate distances, which, you know, 10 magnification is going to give you. You can do a lot of work with a 10x optic. One potential downside for those of us that focus on things like this is there is no parallax adjustment. The parallax is fixed at 100 meters, which, if I had to pick one thing I didn't care for about the Gen 3 1 to 10, that would be it. I would like a parallax adjustment, but I do understand why one wasn't included. Other features, of course, is rapid change of magnification. Those of you who've owned Vortex optics, especially razors in the past, you know that ring used to be very, very stiff. You might have to pull it, take some of the grease out of it, loosen it up. With the 1 to 10, that's not an issue whatsoever. You don't necessarily have to run a switch view on it. You can use your thumb and your finger very, very easily. Of course, it comes with a switch view, so that's something I'm going to use. But I definitely did not feel I was going to have to torque my wrist or wrestle with it, making rapid changes of magnification going from 1 to 10. The EBR reticle, I think, is very, very well thought out for the specific optic we're talking about. We're not really getting that parallax adjustment, but we can still reach out and touch extended distances with, you know, 5.56 or 308 or 6.5 Creedmoor, whatever you're going to mount this optic on. I mounted it on a 5.56 because I feel like best of both worlds. I've got a 1X and I can go all the way out to 10, which is generally where I find myself. It's very rare on a magnified optic, variable magnified optic, where I stop in the middle. It's usually, you know, smallest magnification, greatest magnification, shooting in between. not something I'm really going to do. But I found the reticle to be intuitive, very, very easy to use. If you're familiar with any kind of TMR reticle or even MOA, it's very easy to make that transition in your head, use those subtension lines effectively. Another concern is glass quality. This is something that especially longer range shooters worry about, or people who have to shoot in adverse lighting conditions. Into the sun, sun at your back, twilight, or darkness. If you've got to shoot in low light conditions, it's definitely a concern that you want to have. There of course is the concern that a 24mm objective lens is not going to give you as great a light collection, which can and can't be true depending on the quality of the optic. What I found with the Razor Gen 3, the 1-10, is it collects light very, very well, and it was usable in those twilight and low light conditions. I was able to positively identify my target in failing light, and then in low light conditions when I'm actually pushing weapon light down range using a mod light OKW so I can reach out there, it was no problem whatsoever being able to see to those extended distances. Does it collect light as well as like a 4-18 or a 16 to 25 magnification? Not necessarily, depending on what we're talking about. But remember, this optic can't really be compared to optics with other magnification settings or really other objective tubes. I think it would be unfair, because this is a reason why I don't like comparisons, to try to shoehorn a comparison between this 1-10 into something that's like a 3.5 to 15 or 25 from another company. The scopes probably serve very, very different purposes, and it's pretty plainly easy to say that because the optic you're trying to compare it to doesn't have a 1 power setting. It may not be first focal plane. You kind of see my point. So if you're looking for an optic that has a true 1x setting, then that's kind of the conversation we have to have, and try not to make it do everything. What was Vortex's intent with this optic? I can't really say specifically. You can read up on of course, their ad copy, if you will, or their description or their explanation of the mentality behind the 1-10. My personal feeling is it gives me an optic that's capable of close quarter shooting, but still possible to go out to extended ranges on the same rifle, which is something that can be very, very useful in law enforcement, as well as hunting applications, or for those of you that might feel like you may need it, self-defense. I could definitely see this being applicable to rural, semi-rural areas, or even urban areas. Because the optic is so versatile in light collection. I've got that illuminated reticle. It's very quick and intuitive and easy to make rapid changes to my magnification setting. The versatility of the 1-10 is definitely there. Specifically on the 1 power setting, is the reticle manageable? Kind of already prefaced this, talked about it a little bit, but I did spend a considerable amount of time. Like I said, I spent more time shooting at intermediate and longer ranges with it because I had the ability, but I also spent a considerable amount of time shooting at those closer distances. We're talking 3 yards back to about 25, getting in quick transition drills and working acquisition of that reticle rapidly, usually running on a shot timer, shooting some of my favorite drills. What I found is something that I basically carries over from the 1-6. Because the eye relief is roughly the same, there was no learning curve for me to reacquire any kind of specific eye relief. Some of the 1-6s or 1-8 low power variable magnification optics that have come out in the recent past have had eye relief issues. Usually the more magnification you add, the less eye relief you ultimately get. That's something, I don't know how Vortex did it, but they did it. So I'm a big believer, I'm an owner of the 1-6 optics. I have 2 different rifles that I use quite a bit, and I didn't have to make any kind of considerable knowledgeable changes, specific relearning of technique, to get my eye relief coming from a 1-6 to the 1-10, which I really appreciate. I think a lot of it has to do with just it's clear that they put the time in to designing this thing, put a lot of thought into the footprint because it shares the same weight, roughly the same length as the 1-6. Now I don't know how they did it, but I'm not an engineer, and I'll leave that to the engineers. But did the engineers introduce durability into the optic? This is another concern that we have. While the reticle was very usable at those closer distances, 3, 5, 7, 10, I think the illuminated reticle has the right brightness settings in it. You can lock the brightness setting in, and you've got to stop in between each. So I don't have to go, oh, I missed it, I got to go back. If I want it on, say, setting 8 or setting 9, I can leave it there, pull out, turn it off, push it back in, or I can pull it out, lock it in, push it back in. So the reticle's on the entire time. you're not going to, like I said earlier in the video, you're not going to get the same battery life out of a magnified optic reticle as you are out of, say, a regular red dot, because they generally don't introduce notch filters, or as dark of notch filters, that blue tint that helps increase battery longevity. It's not something you see in magnified optics because you want that ultimate glass clarity for PID and for long-range shooting. I'm not saying that there isn't a notch filter in there. I'm just saying that it's not going to be as beneficial as it could otherwise be. If people are willing to accept a more darker tint to their magnified optics, then we'd probably see longer reticle life. But for me, I'm only going to use that illuminated reticle at those closer distances anyway. The dot itself, to me, was clean and crisp, very easy to see a circular, not a lot of bleed into the etch reticle itself, which I definitely appreciate, because some other reticles out there, if you go up in a certain brightness for lighting conditions that you're in, they can bleed really bad, which is more annoying than it is distracting. But I don't want a lot of excess red or bloom in my point of aim. I'm trying to look through that dot. I'm not trying to see like a red splotch petri dish in front of my face, because the illuminated reticle is bleeding into the reticle, to the actual reticle itself. Not something I experienced on the 1 to 10. As far as durability goes, yeah, drop tests. I did 4 shoulder height concrete drop tests during the review process on the 1 to 10, and it's still ticking. Just real quick, here is my my 5-round confirmation group that I shot after I settled on my 0. That was my 100-yard 5-round confirmation group. Now, after at the end of the review process, I went ahead and punched the bore of the rifle out real quick because we're 2,000 rounds into it. And this is after 4 shoulder height drop tests on concrete every 500 rounds, just kind of like the way I do my pistol optic evaluation or my red dot optic evaluation. It's pretty much how I do all optic evaluations at this point. All optics get concrete. So here's another 5-round group fired after that last drop test. I'd call that still zeroed. I do it so you don't have to. That's probably the most extreme situation. Of course, a caveat I would definitely add is if your optic takes a spill like that, if you lean against a truck and it falls over, or if your QD didn't lock in correctly and the rifle slingshots off of you, or if it's in the patrol car and you're getting out and you bang it against the door or something, or the A pillar or the B pillar or something like that, check your zero as soon as possible. But I like the fact that this reticle, this optic, is not fragile like the optics of yore. Even magnified optics are getting more and more durable. Now I have a very durable optic from a reputable company with a 1 to 10 option with reasonable eye relief. I think completely reasonable weight for what you're getting, and a reasonable footprint, just over 10 inches. There's optics out there that have, you know, less magnification, that weigh more and take up more room. I think I think I said it at the beginning of the video. I don't think that Vortex had to do it first. They just had to do it best. And as of right now, this is the best 1 to 10 I've used. I'm not going to get into specific comparisons, but you know, you can do easy math. The other 1 to 10s that exist. I think that the Gen 3 Razor is a definite step forward in where we should be going with low power variable magnification optics. I think that this is a lot of value added, if you want to use that buzzword, to the optic game. Again, another buzzword. I think this optic will find itself as easily at home on a self-defense gun, if you want to use a magnified optic for self-defense gun, as it would for patrol rifle, self-defense rifle, just general purpose rifle, or hunting rifle. Only potential drawback is extreme long ranges. Even though you can shoot 300, 400, 500, 600 meters on a 10 power reticle, depending on, you know, what you're shooting at, not having that parallax adjustment is one potential downfall to the optic. But I do understand why it's not on there, because that wasn't the overall writing intent to this. This is a general purpose optic with the capability to go to 10x magnification for positive identification and accuracy on targets. It's not something I would necessarily use for a dedicated precision platform. So if I knew I was going to be shooting 200, 300, 400, 500 yards on like a 308 or a 6.5 Creedmoor, it's probably not the optic I would choose. But if I want a designated marksman rifle or a PRS 5.56 caliber rifle, this 1 to 10 is going to be excellent for that. For 3-gun, it's going to be excellent for that. Patrol rifle, excellent for that. Self-defense, general purpose, excellent. Hunting, excellent. I think that covers pretty much all the categories, but don't try to make it into something it's not and say, like, I'm going to go ahead and throw this on my 6.5 and shoot out to 1,000. I mean, you can't, but there's probably other optics that are more suited for that role. As far as a general purpose optic with the features, does it perform? Absolutely. I think it checks all the boxes that people are going to be looking for in a 1x to 10x, especially being first focal plane. It's got a good reticle. It's got very easy, intuitive adjustments, not only switch view, switch mag, I should say, but also reticle adjustments and turret adjustments for zeroing that can capture and protect the optic after you're done zeroing it. Of course, you could leave the cap off if you want to dial in. That's fine. Put the caps back on. And a 34mm main tube comes with an optical or an optional sunshade. Can't really see anything else about it that haven't already talked about. I think if you're curious about it, is it worth the money? My personal opinion is, yeah, absolutely, it's worth the money. It is expensive, but you're getting what you pay for. I truly believe that. I'm Eric Allen with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.